Hello, everybody. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Barbasol Championship full show. That's right, research, data, and DFS tactics all wrapped into one show. So we're going to have to kind of speed through a few parts here. You will recognize that some portions of each show have been cut out to try to get this show within as close to an hour as possible. But we're here for all of your questions regarding wagers and DFS lineups for the Barbasol Championship. So let's get right into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check them out. It is simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my Twitter and Instagram, where I posted research earlier today surrounding the 4 Barbasol championships that have happened at Keen Trace and the winners of said Barbasol championships. So if you would like to see the research that I found and posted online, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. Twitter is also where I post my betting cards every week on the PGA Tour. So if you want to see the weekly wagers that I make, give me a follow over at Twitter. And then Twitter is also where I do my baseball content, quick hitting 3 up, 3 down players that I think will produce their value monetarily in DFS, and 3 players that I don't. So if you want to see some quick hitting baseball content, give me a follow over at Twitter as well. And then Gabe's Twitter is also in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. I took quite a bit from his article for the Scottish Open this week, since there's not a lot known about the Renaissance Club. And tomorrow night, Wednesday, we will be having our usual DFS talk in his Substack chat. So if you want to be a part of that chat, you will need to be a subscriber of his to his article called The Fringe. I highly suggest you do it. It's a very good read, and give him a follow over at Twitter as well. And then lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat is open. What are your questions for the Barbasol? Have you made any wagers? Who do you think has the upper hand here at Keen Trace? How much do you know of the course? All of that good stuff. So let's do the entirety of the week's shows for the 2023 Barbasol Championship. And we're going to start the research portion of the Barbasol full show with last year's tournament fact sheet. And the tournament fact sheet is not out for this year's Barbasol. Might come out tomorrow, but Keen Trace hasn't changed all that much over the years. It's about an hour and a half or so away from me locally. I have never played the course, but I have friends who have, and we will see that there is one major filter that we're going to be using throughout the night tonight. But we are at Keen Trace Golf Club in Nicholasville, Kentucky. It is a par 72 that measures just over 7,300 yards at 7,328. Average green size is about 6,000 square feet. I would list that as average, or right on the tour average. There are some figures that might say it's about 5,500, the average green size on tour. But either way, we're looking about average size greens here at Keen Trace. Quite a bit of fairway, a little bit of rough. You do have 6 holes with water in play, so if you are wayward, bigger numbers can come in to play there. Nothing to do with Architect. This is an Arthur Hills design. The greens are bent, and just like last week at the John Deere, the rough is bluegrass and fescue. It is fairly long, but it's not difficult to play out of, whereas the John Deere is very difficult to play out of. The rough here isn't as long as they keep it at the John Deere, but it is classified as long, but not overly difficult to play out of. So there's a quick look at Keen Trace and the Barbasol Championship. Again, this is last year's GCSA tournament fact sheet, but I do not know of any significant changes that have happened in the past year at Keen Trace. So with that, before we move to Fantasy National, the next portion of the research that we will do, let's bring up Windfinder. And with a lot of similarities to last week, the John Deere that I mentioned, the Midwest in the summer, things are pretty hectic. This forecast has changed a couple times already today. You're going to want to keep on top of it tomorrow if you are playing in any Barbasol DFS contests. But quite a bit of wind on Thursday. Looks like perhaps a thunderstorm might be coming into Nicholasville. And then Saturday looks pretty bad all the way around. Just a pretty big wash on Saturday. We do have Thursday's super forecast, so I will bring that up. Calmer winds in the morning, but the gusts are about the same all day, upwards into the 20 mile an hour. The issue is later on in the day, Thursday, at least forecast for Nicholasville, the sustained winds will pick up. So it's still a little bit too far out to say anything with any confidence that there is an AM PM wave. You're going to want to keep track of that, just like for the Scottish Open tomorrow if you're planning on playing any DFS contest for the Barbasol. But we are going to be looking at some wind metrics. So with that, you see I do have the moderate and windy filters selected. So going back to the beginning of 2022, your top wind performers at the Barbasol Championship this week: Scott Piercy, Cameron Percy, Adam Long, Ryan Armour, Marcus Heligilde, Andrew Novak, Ryo Hitsatsune, Taylor Pendrith, Vince Whaley, and Peter Malnati. Just like with the Scottish Open, I have starred players that are not playing the Barbasol Championship. Of course, Troy Merritt, who should be starred. It doesn't look like he is. Let me put him in here very quickly as well. Troy Merritt, the most recent addition to the Scottish Open. Eric Van Rooyen's over in Scotland. Some of these other players, Michael Lorenzo Vera, Nacho Elvira, don't know why they're missing the Barbasol. They just have withdrawn. So anybody with a star is not in the Barbasol Championship this week. But there's a look at your top win players the past 18 months or so. But the extremely important filter that we're going to be looking at tonight for the Barbasol, we do every year here at Keen Trace, this is easy. This is an extremely easy track for professionals. In fact, while that loads, I'll bring up the tournament conditions or the historic conditions here at Keen Trace. Literally every single round the past 2 years has been easy. 2020 didn't happen because 2020 was ridiculous. 2019, while it happened, Fantasy National doesn't have the data in there, which is a little bit odd. It can only work with what you have. And then in 2018, when the Barbasol moved to Keen Trace, was easy. So literally every measured round here at Keen Trace has been easy. So we will see that as a continuous factor, and it's going to be a big deal in the mixed condition model. So let me reset this. Apologies, I don't know why Fantasy National decided to reset the filters. But anyway, your top total performers when a round has been easy the past 18 months, if Fantasy National will decide to cooperate. It is struggling at the moment. There we go. So your top performers when a round has been easy: Akshay Bhatia, Tyler Duncan, Vincent Norman, Justin Lauer, Taylor Pendrith, Satoshi Kodaira, Harry Higgs, Peter Malnati, Marcus Hilakelde, Ryo Hitsatsune. And Ryo Hitsatsune is the top 10. You'll see Hilakelde, Hitsatsune, players that are not on the PGA Tour. Again, this is the part of the strategic alliance with the DP World Tour and PGA Tour to have some of the players of the DP World Tour come over here and play. And that is what Helig Kilday's 4 rounds are actually last year's Barbasol. He played the Barracuda as well, but that is not in Fantasy National, as that is not a stroke play event. And we'll talk about that next week as the alternate to the Open Championship. But for the most part, these players that have limited amount of rounds that are on the DP World Tour are probably from the Barbasol. Now, Hitsatsune, at least in terms of easy, I imagine this might be the Sony, as he played, the Zozo last year. But he's played in a few PGA tournaments, especially recently. I'm trying to look at some other DP World Tour players. Players like Tario, Sebastian Garcia Rodriguez came over last year. Matthias Schmid was one of the players that came over here last year from the DP World Tour and is now playing some on the PGA Tour. So getting a little bit of exposure to these DP World Tour players. But there are your top performers when a round has been easy the past 18 months. So let's go ahead and check out Keen Trace from a scorecard and graphical view. First thing I like to do is look at the 9th and 10th most difficult holes, figure out where par is. 9th and the 9th most difficult still under par. The 8th is still under par. The 7th is slightly over par. So at least in terms of these scores, you wouldn't think that this would be terribly easy. Yes, it's on the easier side, 200ths as the 8th most difficult hole. But I want you to notice the most difficult hole on the course is only about 1/10 of a shot over par. So not a lot of big scores will come in unless players find the water. In fact, you only have 18% bogeys, and this is the most difficult hole on the course. You see the 6th most difficult hole is only 100th, slightly over par. Whereas, take a look at these eagle rates on these par 5s. Almost 7%, 7.5%, 3.5%, 3.5%. Huge eagle rates on these par 5s, and the birdie rates for these other par 4s, 20%, 50% on this par 5. Birdie rates of 45%, 63%. Even the par 3 second is almost 20% birdie rate. So lots and lots and lots of low scores, and the scores that are, or the holes that do play difficult, aren't really terribly difficult to par. It's just par is a decent score on that hole, and that's about it. If you're not getting birdies on this course, you are getting left behind. So we are looking at another extreme birdie fest here this week, just like we were at the Rocket Mortgage. Moving to strokes gained by shot type, your top 10s. This is a ball striking course. Look at all the ball striking here. 1.15 for putting, for the approach. Now putting slightly outweighing the off the tee, but not by much. Off the tee is a pretty big deal here. You can see it's about, maybe 4 times the importance of the around the green. If you're having to use around the green, things are not going well for you, and you're not going to be much of a factor in the tournament. There's your top 10s, your top 5s. The approach really still taking off 0.75, so the off the tee is catching up to the putting. In terms of the players that are in the top 5, the ball striking is almost double the short game. And for your winners, off the tee actually does catch and surpass putting. This is a ball striking course through and through. The reason why putting is not so important is that this course is so easy. Generally, players are pretty damn close to the hole on their approach shots, and that's why approach is such a humongous factor here. And off the tee is as well. Moving into average strokes gained by hole by par, with this being an easy par 72, no surprise the par 5s are carrying the weight. The par 4s are actually pretty darn important here as well. Par 3s mitigated. Par 4s rise for your top 5 finishers. And then for your winners, the par 4s are actually where you're going to gain the most on the field. Having said that, you're still going to have to play these par 5s extremely well. I mean, they are very, very easy. 2/3 of a shot under par, half a shot basically under par, half a shot under par, 3/4 of a shot under par. You're going to have to get your birdies on the par 5s, but for the winners, they are taking advantage of the par 4s. And you can see actually par 3s are negative. So it's going to be all in the par 4s and par 5s as we go through the evening tonight. Hole composition here at Keen Trace. You've got 2 par 3s that measure 175 to 200, 2 that measure 200 to 225. You have 1 short par 4, not drivable, but short par 4, 350 to 400. It's the opening hole, 392, a very gentlemanly handshake, if you will, to your round as it plays to 1/4 of a shot under par as a par 4. It actually yields a decent amount of eagles for a par 4. That's not drivable. And good birdie rate. So short opening par 4. Majority of our par 4s fall 400 to 450. 5 of them. 4 from 450 to 500, and they're not all that long. You have 458, so you can see that coming down under 450. 451 easily could come down under 450. 461 and 462 might stretch a little bit or be a little bit more difficult to come into this bucket, but for the most part, we're looking at 400 to 450 par 4s tonight and this week for the Barbasol. And then for the par 5s, evenly split between 500 and 600, 2 below 550, 2 above 550. Approach shots. Even though this course is very easy, you don't have a whole lot of wedges in here. Again, the par 5s are attackable, so most players are going for them in 2. So that's why you have quite a few 200 plus. And then it makes sense with a lot of these shorter par 4s, your 125 to 150, 150 to 175, and so on. So we'll take a very quick look, and see if proximity is something that we want to look at. But a pretty even distribution in terms of approach shots between the attackable par 5s and these shorter par 4s. Historic cut line here at Keen Trace has been -3 a couple of times. Last year moved to -4, which was what the John Deere was. Rocket Mortgage, an easy tournament. Easy tournament. Birdies, almost 25% birdies versus 11% bogeys. So more than double the amount of birdies that you get bogeys here. The doubles bar is somewhat visible. If you are wayward, you can find water on those 6 holes. But there are a decent amount of eagles on this course. You can actually see the bar. I can get my cursor into it. There are quite a few eagles. You stack the 2, eagles and birdies on top, bogeys and doubles on top. Many more scores under par than over par. Accuracy, a little bit higher than the average tour event. That's a little bit misleading as, again, this rough is long, but it's not extremely difficult to play out of. So players just care about the distance. They just care about the distance. There might be a couple of shorter holes where players can choose to lay up to give themselves a better angle at the green. But for the most part, players are just trying to get as close to the hole after their tee shot as they can. Green and regulation percentage, almost 70% here at Keen Trace. Just extremely easy. Scrambling is easy. 3 putts or less. Everything is just pointing to an easier tournament. Proximity, again, these greens are about average size. You're about average in terms of proximity in regulation. But just take just look at the birdie putts from 0 to 5 feet. 50.5% here at Keen Trace. That's why putting just isn't a big factor. because most players are pretty damn close to the hole. This is just a birdie fest. It's just easy. So let's take a look at a few things here. I'm actually going to keep this easy filter on for majority of the evening. We saw that this was just an extreme ball striking course. So your top off the tee players, when a round's been easy the past 18 months in the field at the Barbasol Championship, Cameron Champ, Taylor Pendrith, Trevor Cohn, Steven Stallings, not Scott Stallings, Steven Stallings, Vincent Norman, Tyler Duncan, Josh Teeter, local boy, is going to get a whole lot of publicity, at least locally. MJ Duffy, Marcus Helig-Kilday, and Kevin Streelman. Again, note Troy Merritt and Lucas Nemec, I think is how you say that, are not here. They are over in Scotland. And then your approach players, top strokes gained approach players in the past 18 months: Lucas Glover, Ryan Gerard, Ryan Moore, Kyle Stanley, Justin Lauer, Russell Knox, Marcus Helig-Kilday, Satoshi Kodaira, Kevin Roy, and Ted Potter. We showed it earlier just because of the easy, but something else that we can see historically here at the Barbasol, every single round at Keen Trace has been listed as average in terms of green speed. So, sticking with the pattern, I think it's safe to say we can look comfortably at average speed bent greens, and even though putting isn't a humongous factor here, it is definitely something we want to look at. So I will back this out all the way to 2019, again just due to the fact that there are so few rounds on average speed bent greens, but your best performers in those conditions, your best putters on average speed bent greens: Justin Lauer, Peter Malnati, Richie Werenski, Greg Chalmers, I can't talk, Samuel No, Hank Lebioda, David Hearn, Taylor Pendrith, Sebastian Garcia Rodriguez, and Harry Higgs. All right, looks like that'll do it for the strokes gained. Go take a look at a few things here. Let's see, we'll go birdies and bogeys because this is such an easy tournament, easy course. So we will absolutely be looking at birdies or better. But there's another part of this tab or this page view that I brought into the mixed condition model, and I'll explain it later. But for ease, we'll just look at some birdies or better for the initial research and data dive portion of the show. So your top birdies or better gained players when a round has been easy in the past 18 months, that's in the field for the Barbasol: Vincent Norman, Tyler Duncan, Lucas Glover, Akshay Bhatia, Peter Malnati, Matty Schmid, Justin Lauer, Harry Higgs, Ryo Hitsatsune, and Satoshi Kodaira. Let's see, I think that's going to be everything we cover here in that tab. Fairways and greens, we covered off the tee. That's essentially where we're at. We'll come back to proximity. Let's look at par 4s and par 5s very quickly, and then we're going to go to Microsoft Excel for the data dive portion. So we saw that the majority of the holes for par 4s measured 400 to 450. It's close with the 450 to 5s, but I'm going to have a little bit of spoiler here, and we'll see it in Microsoft Excel. It's the 400 to 450 that is the most important range. So our top par 4 performers from 400 to 450 yards when a round has been easy: Hank Lebioda, Russell Knox, Sean O'Hare, Peter Malnati, Soren Kjeldsen, Lucas Glover, Akshay Bhatia, Ryan Armour, Ryo Hitsatsune, and Marcus Helig-Kilday. And I'll explain why I'm keeping the easy filter on throughout the evening when we get to the mixed condition model, because normally I'll just look at the calendar year. But there's a reason why I'm keeping it on in the research and data dive portion. Finally, we'll look at par fives. You have to score on them here. They are just extremely important. If you are not getting birdies, at least on these par fives, you're falling behind. So your top par five performers in the field this week at the Barbasol Championship: Vincent Norman, Tyler Duncan, Cameron Champ, Harry Higgs, Patton Gazire, Vincent Whaley, Cameron Percy, Marcus Hillig-Kilday, Akshay Bhatia, Josh Teeter, Kramer Hickok, and Kyle Westmoreland. All right, we're going to take a look at a few more metrics after we look at a little bit in Microsoft Excel. So let me bring up the comparison course, and we'll do both, but I'll start with the detail. We saw this in the graphs in Fantasy National. Approach, a big deal. Off the tee, humongous, 1.96. It might be one of the highest off the tee numbers for continuous or full field continuous courses on the PGA Tour. I mean, against the average full field course, against the full field course, it's 50% more important. Approach is 16.5% more important. Just a humongous ball striking tournament is what the Barbasol is. You can see around the green absolutely has zero factor in who plays well here. Putting slightly under full field course average. It still has some amount of merit and weight to it, but this is a ball striking course. So that is why we put such an emphasis on that part in the strokes gained page view. Moving to distance and fairways, the raw numbers aren't going to be too much for you. That's a pretty low distance number, which is surprising considering what we just saw in Fantasy National. But against other full field courses, 17% less important for distance. It's actually been the fairways. So if the players are, and the reason why I think the way you can think about this, since everybody knows that the rough isn't penal, everybody's going to be hitting their longer clubs, drivers, and 3-woods anyway. So the players who are actually able to find the fairway with said drivers and 3-woods are going to be in much better shape if they're playing from the fairway than they are from the rough. Obvious statements are obvious, but that's why this fairways gained number is so high. When fairways are, right at tour average. Distance hasn't been the biggest factor here. Greens, 2021 was extremely important. Last year it wasn't terribly important. You'll notice that I don't have 2019 in there. Again, we don't have the 2019 statistics. I don't know why. We just don't. And then 2020, because 2020 was the way it was. So really only 2 years worth of looking at data in here. Scoring, as you would expect, it's all in the birdies gained. And you're going to see this Eagles number be really, really high as well. A lot of times I like to, I would think to ignore this, but the vision will be skewed. But we'll go back to Fantasy National and the course breakdown. I'm going to have to unskew the vision, but I'll just again refer you to these eagle rates: 7%, 3.5%, 3.5%, 7.5%. Eagles galore here at Keen Trace. That's why we are not going to ignore this. Not this week, not this course. It is a big factor. So birdies are better gained, obviously, but there will be some Eagles factors. Par threes, we saw that graphically. Doesn't really matter if there is a range. It's the 175 to 200. We'll see in the mixed condition model. I don't include par threes. I just feel like there are other more important factors here at Keen Trace. Par fours overall, only 1% more important, but the range that I was mentioning, this 400 to 450, extremely important. Extremely important. And then par fives, 26.5% more important than the average full field course. The two ranges are both positive. So if they're about equal, we'll just look at par fives. And we'll see that over here. Par threes, if we were going to look at, would be the 175 to 200. Par fours, I mean, the 400 to 450 is double the 450 to 5. I mean, double. And it's more than half of the total in strokes gained par 4. So clearly the emphasis is in this range. And it's been very, very consistent in these 2 years. Then moving into par 5s, you only had 1 year where it was 0 to 500. But these two ranges are pretty equal. So we're just going to be looking at total par 5s. Last thing that we're going to look at in terms of a research for Keen Trace, either raw detail or against other courses. I know generally these proximity numbers don't matter or don't mean a lot on their own. Look at the 150 to 175 compared to the 200 plus. Generally speaking, these numbers should rise. The further away you are in proximity, the bigger the numbers you're going to get. That's just the way proximity works. 150 to 175 is the exact same number as the 200 plus. And when we go to the evaluation, while total prox is 5%, look at this humongous number here. 88% more important in 150 to 175. And you think about it, it makes a whole lot of sense with the bevy of short par 4s from 400 to 450. And we saw just how important those par 4s were. Some of the par 4s in the 450 to 5, there's a 456, there's a 451. Those are going to probably play under 450 at some point during the week. So players, especially pros, are going to have this 150 to 175 range quite often here at Keen Trace. So there's a look at Keen Trace from a raw detail and compared to other courses. So with that, we'll jump, hopefully the last time, to Fantasy National, and we'll take a look at a couple more of these metrics that we surpassed, mainly in the proximity, because we just saw how important that 150 to 175 range is. Your top proximity players from 150 to 175 when a round has been easy, going back to the beginning of 2022, Ryan Armour, Scott Piercy, Kyle Stanley, Justin Lauer, Andrew Novak, Carl Yuan, Ryan Moore, Soren Kjeldsen, Satoshi Kodaira, and Kevin Roy. All right, I think that's going to do it for the research and data dive. I know it was a little bit rushed, but I would still like to talk about my mixed condition model, make some lineups for you all. So let's go ahead and run to the mixed condition model that I have made for the Barbasol this week. So clearly, as I mentioned in the intro, there are a few parts of the research and data dive shows that get skipped. The early look file, the last year's mixed condition model, just trying to squeeze everything I can into one show. But I do use some of the early look file in my research over on social media that I use as part of the criteria for previous winners. So again, if you want to see some of that, go. I ask that you go give me a follow over at social media. I posted quite a bit around the former winners of the Barbasol there today. But my mixed condition model for the Barbasol this week. Let's talk about why I have easy to par on all of these filters except for putting. The reason why I use easy to par, not too dissimilar from when I'm trying to include live players. Again, this is part of the DP World Tour PGA Tour Strategic Alliance, where you have some European players come over here for a couple of events. Especially this Marcus Helig-Kilday seemed to pop on a whole lot of the metrics that we looked at. He has one event measured here in Fantasy National. It's the Barbasol. It's just off your screen. Gosh dang it. Let's see if I zoom in. Yeah, there we go. Right at the bottom of your screen. He finished top 10 here last year for the Barbasol. Around the green didn't freaking matter. He putt okay, but he ball struck it wonderfully. He's got one tournament. Then, of course, he does play the Barracuda. He played the Barracuda the following week last year, but we don't have those stats because it is not a stroke play event. But that's the reason why I have the easy filter for every single metric this week, because I want to include the players that might have played last year. Players like Helig-Kilday, players, let's see, like Matthias Schmid last year, Jason Scrivener, Soren Kjeldsen played in this last year. These players, they're going to be the only rounds they have, but something is better than nothing. It's not a perfect science, I understand, but that's the reason why I kept the easy to par filter on every single one of these metrics, and why I brought them in to the mixed condition model. 15% off the tee. Look, we saw it graphically in Fantasy National. We saw it in Microsoft Excel. It's just a huge part of the Barbasol approach. 10%. I did back this off a little bit because I wanted to get a few things in here. I would not blame you one bit if you wanted to put this at 15% as well. But off the tee, relative to other courses, is such a monstrously important facet of the Barbasol. I decided to put that at 15%. 10% approach, easy. 5% in putting on average bent greens. And the only reason why I feel comfortable putting putting in the mixed condition model is that if we go to the historic conditions, every single round measured at Keen Trace has been average speed. Every single round. I've only got it at 5%, but I think it's worth looking at to make sure these players are adept at these average speed bent greens. And they were only slightly less important than the average full field course. You're still going to have to make some putts here. So 5% in putting on average speed bent greens, 5% in eagles. Look, I'll do it, or I'll refer you here for the third time tonight. 7%, 7.5% eagle rates, 3.5. Those are good eagle rates. Eagles happen here quite a bit. So not only am I looking at birdies or better, I'm also factoring in a little bit of eagles. If a player is adept at getting eagles on par 5s mainly, I want to be able to see it. 5% eagles, 15% birdies or better. We didn't talk about it too much. 10% greens. Look, that makes a lot of sense with that ball striking tournament. These greens are average size. Around the green's not going to matter, so you got to make sure you're at least hitting the green. 10% in greens when it's easy. 10% proximity, 150 to 175. We saw just the humongous number there in Microsoft Excel around that proximity, which makes a lot of sense with the 400 to 450. So only 5% in all of par 4s, but 10% in the 400 to 450, the most important range here at Keen Trace. Look, you do have a short par 4. You have a few long ones, but for the most part, the par 4s are going to play 400, 450, so that's where the emphasis is. And then par 5s, 15%. Look, you just got to play them well. You've got to birdie them, sometimes eagle them. If you're getting pars on these par 5s, if you're not good at par 5s, you're going to get lapped here quickly at Keen Trace. So there's the mixed condition model for the Barbasol this week. We move to Microsoft Excel for the last time tonight and the reveal of my rankings. And just for clarification, because the Barbasol is still more than 24 hours away, and it is an alternate field event. I meant to hit filter. To make my rankings, I had to insert some projected ownerships. So anybody that's listed at 1% is a guess, meaning that they haven't been chosen by members at Fantasy National. So this isn't going to be a true representation of what their ownership's going to be. It's just the fact that they haven't been used by the few members who have looked at the Barbasol early this week. Evening, Darnell. Thanks for jumping in chat. I appreciate it. As you're always willing to do whenever you're able to catch the show, especially on an alternate field tournament like the Barbasol. Much appreciated. Hope your week has went well, that you are ready for the Barbasol and the Scottish Open. But every other one of these percent owns has at least a modicum of statistics behind it. So players that have humongous ownerships, they are getting a lot of popularity by the members at Fantasy National. So I wanted to make sure that is put up front, that these 1% aren't true projected ownerships, since the Barbasol is an alternate field and we are still a day away. The community at Fantasy National hasn't gravitated to the Barbasol just yet. Anyway, with that, my top 10 for the Barbasol this week. Number 1. Well, shoot. I thought. There we go. Sorry, I had the wrong page view. So you can see these 1%. They aren't what I was talking about. They aren't the actual projected ownerships. These will be. But the reveal of my top 10. My number 1 player for the Barbasol this week is Tyler Duncan. Marcus Held-Kilday is number 2. Akshay Bhatia, Justin Lauer, and Vincent Norman round out my top 5. Taylor Pendrith, Lucas Glover, Ryo Hitsatsune, Satoshi Kodaira, and Josh Teeter round out my top 10. You will notice that I do not have anything in here for course value or course form. The 4 winners of the Barbasol, of course, Troy Merritt, your winner in 2018, no one would have seen the course before then, so you kind of write him off. 2019, Jim Herman had never seen he didn't play the year before, so he didn't have any course history at all. Last year's winner, Trey Mullinex, had never played at Keene Trace. He had won the Barbasol, but he had never played at Keene Trace. No value there. Overall, there is not a lot to be gained, at least historically, when looking at previous course form at Keene Trace. So I have removed it completely, which means there's quite a bit of emphasis on ownership or lack thereof in the composite rankings. Look, Marcus Held-Kilday, he top 10 this last year. Does that mean he's going to top 10 this year? Doesn't mean it. He played the tournament well, and that's why he's up here so high, because of all of the metrics that he seemingly popped on. I would probably put him in my top 20. I don't know if I'd have him second, but it does make some sense, especially since he played it well last year. Otherwise, look, I was extremely high on Tyler Duncan this past week at the John Deere. He made the cut. He played okay. I don't see any reason why in a lesser field he shouldn't be one of your key players, especially when it's easy. You see 6th off the tee when it's easy. Number 2 in birdies when it's easy. Number 2 in par 5s when it's easy in this field. I don't understand why, 1, he's 7,500, and 2, why the few members who have looked at this tournament haven't gravitated towards him yet. Tyler Duncan is going to be an integral part of my lineups for the Barbasol. I'll be using Held-Kilday. Bhatia is probably going to be one of the bigger names that people gravitate towards, so understand he's going to be very, very popular. It kind of sucks because this is somebody that, I kind of keyed in on early this week for the Barbasol. It's just about the putter, kind of like it is for Tyler Duncan. And the putter doesn't necessarily take him out of contention here, but you are going to have to make some putts. Justin Lauer, Vincent Norman, Taylor Pendrith, number 2 off the tee when it's easy. Number 1 in short par 4s with Vincent Norman. So I like both of these players. They're going to be extremely popular for sure. Lucas Glover is actually the highest priced player at 10-3. Makes sense. He's in great form coming off 2 very good tournaments, especially the John Deere. He has some trouble with par 5s, so I would be a little bit more cautious on Glover. Teeter is a local guy. He has played the Barbasol at Keen Trace very, very well. Makes a lot of sense. All right, let's go through this price board pretty quickly, see where we can find some values, and then start making some lineups for the Barbasol. Okay, in the 5 digits, we only have 2 players, Lucas Glover and Taylor Pendrith. I really like Taylor Pendrith this week. He doesn't have really any bad statistics other than eagles, which you can argue you don't necessarily need as long as you're birdieing everything. It would be nice to grab an eagle or 2 on these par 5s, but top 10 on average speed bent greens. Very good at greens when it's easy. Number 1 at these short par 4s. Top 15 in approach, top 20 in par 5s. Everything lines up very well for Taylor Pendrith. He also played very well here last year. I believe he tied for 4th. I know he was a top 10. I think he was a top 5. I do have some concerns with Lucas Glover, so I am willing to fade him if I think he's going to get very, very popular. I'm willing to fade Lucas Glover. In the 9Ks, Kevin Streelman, Vincent Norman, MJ Duffy, Akshay Bhatia, Carl Yuan, Justin Lauer, Cam Champ, Nicholas Norgard Muller. It's just been shortened to Norgard, but Nicholas Norgard Muller and Andrew Novak. Carl Yuan's been getting a little bit of love. He doesn't have any bad statistics. In fact, 58 is his worst here. Okay, I guess I can kind of see it. He's very adept at hitting greens, especially when it's easy. He's going to have to be a lot better at these shorter par 4s. He's going to be a lot better at the par 5s. Bhatia, going to be very, very common. It sucks because I really, really like him. Probably one of the few chalky plays that I can't recommend you get away from. I think it's going to be pretty good for him this week. Kevin Streelman, I don't want really much of. He's a grinder. He is not a birdie getter. He's a grinder. He's good when pars are good scores. You see the par 5s, he's not been good, especially when it's easy. The short par 4s, not been good. I don't want any part of Kevin Streelman. So Lucas Glover and Kevin Streelman, even though Lucas Glover is rated so high, these 2 players I am extremely comfortable fading. Vincent Norman's going to be very, very good as well. I mean, you see two metrics that he's number 1 at. Birdies are better, and par 5s. He's tied for number 1 with Taylor Pendrith in the par 4s, the short par 4s. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get away from Vincent Norman either, which is going to be rough because he's going to be very popular. Take a long look at MJ Duffy. I do like MJ Duffy this week. He is an off the tee based player, and he loves it when it's easy. Now the irons are going to have to be a lot better, yes, but I think this is a good spot for MJ Duffy. So don't be surprised if he plays well. Talked about Carl Yuan. Justin Lauer, probably going to have a lot of support as well. Off the tee is his worst thing, which is important here, but man, he's elite at a lot of other things, at least elite compared to the others in this field. 7th in birdies or better, 5th in approach, 3rd in greens, number one in average bent speed or average bent green putting. Justin Lauer should be pretty good. Look, anytime you're talking about off the tee, you got to think about Cam Champ. Andrew Novak, I don't think I really want much of this week. So there's a look at the 9s. We'll move to the 8s. I don't want to go through every single player because I still want to make some lineups, but let's highlight a few here. Grayson Murray. The par 5s are going to have to be a lot better, but he is coming off of a top 10 at the John Deere. So he's in great form. He's an off-the-tee based player. His irons have been pretty good, especially when it's easy. I'd like some Grayson Murray. I'm hoping that Marcus Helig-Kilday will be pretty unique for the players that are actually playing the Barbasol. He won't be unique for the contestants that are members of Fantasy National. They have access to these statistics like I do and like I'm showing you. But I'm hoping overall he will be pretty unique in terms of in the contest. I really like Marcus Helig-Kilday. I would not be surprised if Josh Teeter gets a lot of love. He will be talked about quite often as a local pro player. Marty Doe, pretty interesting, I suppose. But where I'm going in the 8Ks, I don't want to skip Hitsatsune either. He seemingly popped on every single one of those metrics as well. So in the 8Ks, Grayson Murray, Hitsatsune, and Helig-Kilday are where I'm going. I don't mind a little Marty Doe. I like Josh Teeter, but I have a feeling he's going to be a bit more popular than what you might think. Don't really want anything to do with Patton Kizzire, even though he's probably one of the bigger names in this tournament. He's not an off-the-tee type player. He does take advantage of par 5, so if you want to believe in Kizzire, that's your angle. But I am quite worried about this off-the-tee for him. Moving into the upper 7s, we have a few players. If the wind picks up, like we saw at the beginning of the show with Windfinder, if the wind picks up, think about Scott Piercy. He generally plays well in the wind. Of course, my number 1 player, Tyler Duncan. I think Matty Schmid should be pretty good this week as well. Someone to think about. And I've mentioned him in a few other tournaments. Ryan Gerard, especially with the fact that the par 5s are so important, and he is number 2 in approach when it's been in easy rounds. I like Ryan Gerard quite a bit. I know it's not saying that he's going to be unique. I'm hoping he's more unique than what Fantasy National is showing. I think Gerard's going to be pretty good. So that's where I'm looking at in the 7s, and the upper 7s, I should say. I want to believe in Smotherman, but he's not been in great form lately, so it's kind of hard for me to back Smotherman in that case. Again, with the wind, pay attention to the forecast if you're playing DFS contests for the Barbasol. If the wind is expected to pick up, take a long look at Scott Piercy. But I'm going with this trio in the upper 7s, and they really just fall into the mid 7s. Duncan and Schmidt especially. I do like Gerard. I think he's going to be a little bit more unique than this, but it would be a reason to be cautious if you think he's going to be this popular. Moving into the low 7s, a couple of players that I really want to gravitate your attention toward. Marcus Kinholt, another one of these players coming over from the DP World Tour, pretty solid over there. So you're going to be trying to get a lot of uniqueness from him. So hopefully he is as unique as what it's showing. I do like Marcus Kinholt. If you want name value, Jazz Jane Wantananon is here. He made a big splash 2 or 3 years ago, and then kind of went back to the DP World Tour. Haven't heard much from him since, but he is here. Jim Herman's a former champion here. Let's see. Ryan Moore, kind of interesting. Now, he is not the best at going low when it's easy, but his irons have been very, very good. 3rd. He's 7th in greens when it's easy, and he's top 20 at the proximity. Ryan Moore might be somebody to take a pretty good look at as well in the low 7s. Doc Redman as well, I suppose. Especially with the propensity to go low. The issue with Doc Redman is his irons haven't been all that great, even in a pretty weak field, and just inside, thank goodness. 66, his proximity isn't the greatest. So whereas Ryan Moore has the proximity, the greens, and the irons, Doc Redman has the propensity to go low. He plays these shorter par fours much better putter. So take who you want out of those two. But I do think both of those are decent plays. And then finally, in the low sevens, Kevin Roy. I really like Kevin Roy again this week. Again, it's going to be easy. He's probably going to be pretty popular, though. But I think this is a worthwhile play, especially with the irons being as good as they've been. He just has to be much better at the short par fours this week. In the 6Ks, there's not a whole lot that I want to bring to your attention. With that said, a couple of names that you can think about. Ryan Armour. Again, he's not great at par fives, and he's going to get lapped if he doesn't do well on these par fives, but it's the irons and particularly the par fours, that these short par fours that he's very good at. That would be the appeal of Ryan Armour. He's probably going to be one of the more popular 6K plays, but if you're going to try to get very, very greedy, do a Taylor Pendrith, Akshay Bhatia, Cam Champ type of start, and you're needing some price savings, I don't hate the idea of Ryan Armour. I wouldn't do it too often because there's not a lot in these 6Ks that I like, but I don't hate the idea of a Ryan Armour at 68. And then the only other name that I want to throw out for you all is, I just saw him at 64, Soren Kjeldsen. His numbers aren't going to be nearly what Marcus Hillig-Kilday's were, but Soren Kjeldsen's a very good player on the DP World Tour as well. So I can envision him having some success, and I do believe he made the cut here last year. And Soren Kjeldsen's played in a few majors before. So, if you're really being greedy, you can come down to 64 and Soren Kjeldsen. Don't hate it. He's got a couple of statistics that are very, very good. Greens, proximity, but again, this is a very small sample size from last year's Barbasol. All right, there's a look at the price board. We're going to make some lineups here fairly quickly. There are no tiers contests. At least they have not been released yet as of, say 8 o'clock Eastern. So if there are tiers contests, feel free to reach out to me if you want some advice. But we're going to jump straight into some classic lineups. So our fellow contestants, for those who have taken a look at the Barbasol so far, if they're going into the 10Ks, we'll use Taylor Pendrith, and then I'm going to try to save them a little bit of money here and go with Bhatia. This very well could be Vincent Norman. This could be Taylor Pendrith, Vincent Norman. It could be Vincent Norman, Akshay Bhatia, however you wish. And then at the bottom, looks like Satoshi Kodaira and Kevin Roy, and a little bit of Trevor Cone are getting a little bit, but I will use Kevin Roy. I imagine he's going to be pretty popular. I am loath to use too many low sevens, as I imagine most contestants are going to be pretty gun shy in going into the 6Ks in an alternate field event or the low sevens many times. If they are, it's Kevin Roy and Satoshi Kodaira, but I don't know how many lineups would put both of them in there. But if they do, this gives them 8,100 per player. Let's see. There could be an Austin Smotherman, Marcus Hillig-Kilday, or Marux, if I could spell. Hillig-Kilday. There we go. So that's leaving $200 on the table. A little bit bloated in terms of the ownerships. Again, not too many members of Fantasy National have looked at the Barbasol yet, but you can see that is probably going to be a very, very popular Stars and Scrubs type lineup, going Pendrith and Norman or Pendrith and Batia, bottoming out at Roy, maybe using Kadira, and then filling in maybe a Scott Piercy is in here. Ryan Gerard would also make some sense as well. That looks like a fairly common style lineup. Another way I could envision some lineups being built this week for the Barbasol. We'll go Norman. Actually, I don't want to use Batia too many times because Batia will be used. But let's do Norman and Lauer, and we'll bottom out at Ryan Gerard at 75, and just really kind of try to save or not go into the low sevens. I don't think very many of our fellow contestants are going to be comfortable going into the low sevens. So Vincent Norman, Lauer, Piercy, and Gerard are the boundaries. Again, you have this 8K-ish type of range. We used Helig Kilday. Josh Teeter could be getting some love as the local boy. 7,600. That's Piercy, Gerard. Look, this is going to be $100 over, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of some lineups. If they go Norman, Lauer, maybe Teeter, maybe they do come down off of Gerard to a lower 7 to get a Smotherman or not Novak. Marty Doe also getting some love. Yeah, okay, we'll do that. Instead of Josh Teeter, it's Marty Doe. There you go. It's right on the number, 18%. So there's a look at a balanced lineup and how I can envision a lot of balanced lineups looking for the Barbasol. If we're going to maneuver around that, look, it's going to be pretty difficult, especially up top, because I love Taylor Pendrith. I really like Vincent Norman. Don't be surprised by MJ Duffy. But where I'm going to be getting my uniqueness is in the sevens. So I'm gonna start this team with Taylor Pendrith. I just really like the way this sets up for him. Played well here last year. Probably too common to go Pendrith and Akshay Bhatia, but you can go Taylor Pendrith and Grayson Murray. Ryo Hitsatsune is somebody that popped on a whole lot of these metrics, and he hasn't been getting any attention from the members at Fantasy National. Marcus Hilliard-Kilday, somebody that I'm, again, very high on. And this gives us 7,500 basically per player. You don't even have to go into the low sevens if you don't want to. I gave you a few names in the low sevens. Ryan Moore, perhaps. Doc Redman, perhaps. Marcus Kinnolt. Kevin Roy. But I'm using Tyler Duncan, which I'll put him here. In the upper sevens, Scott Piercy if the wind picks up. Marty Doe, Josh Teeter, Ryan Gerard. See, it's going to be a little bit difficult to find an extremely unique lineup, as you can see here. Duncan is very unique. Hitsatsune very unique, and we're still having trouble doing it. Let's see. Hitsatsune, Hilliard-Kilday. We can throw Cameron Champ in this. Why not? Off the tee based tournament. You'd have to go 6,200. Dang, I thought he was a little cheaper than that. Hitsatsune, Hilliard-Kilday. Yeah, we'll throw Josh Teeter. Why not? We didn't end up using him in the chalky lineup. So then this becomes, Doc Redman, Ryan Moore. I'll throw Ryan Moore into this. Unique compared to the other two lineups that we built, or at least the chalky lineups, we're at 11.5. Hitsatsune is probably going to be pretty darn unique. I'm hoping Hillig Kilday is a little bit more unique than this. Ryan Moore's apparently not getting a lot of love. Tyler Duncan, my number one player. If you're trying to get greedy and fit in as many of these top-end players as you can, let's see how greedy we can get. I just used Taylor Pendrith, but I'm just very, very high on Pendrith. Let's go Pendrith. Let's go Vincent Norman and Cameron Champ. And see how greedy we can get. I mentioned at 68, Ryan Armour is somebody we can think about, but with the extreme amount of greed at the top, I'm going to have to come all the way down to Soren Kjeldsen at 64. Somebody that is a very, very good player, just hasn't played much on the PGA Tour. So now we're at that 7,200 range where, this is, for me, Tyler Duncan and Kevin Roy. But in the interest of using different names, we can use Matthias Schmid, who played fairly well at this same tournament last year, 6,900. Ryan Armour, if you're not afraid to do 2 6Ks in an alternate field event, you're going to be gaining a lot of uniqueness, I think. If you're loath to do that, you've got Doc Redman, and then another 72, which would be Ryan Moore, but you can use Kevin Roy. This is showing a whole lot of ownership, basically because of the 2 main players up top, but you're going to be pretty unique using Soren Kjeldsen and Doc Redman. Don't know how much Cameron Champ is going to garner some attention this week, so I would like your chances of being pretty unique with this lineup. And a reminder tomorrow that by the time my show starts, 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, you're going to have about 2 or 3 hours to get your lineups in. So it's going to be a great opportunity to ask your last minute questions. Of course, we're going to check the forecast. You'll have up to the second projected ownerships to see who your fades are, who you might want to pivot to, all of that. And of course, being a Wednesday evening, Gabe and I will be in his Substack chat after my show tomorrow answering questions as well. So if you're not a member or if you haven't subscribed to his article, highly suggest you do so. You'll be able to join us in his chat and continue the DFS discussion there. Darnell, I appreciate you jumping in chat. Thanks for dropping by. And thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. I always appreciate it, especially on these alternate field events. I know they're not very popular, but there are great values, especially in the wager market. If you're willing to do a little research on these alternate field events, these lesser known and lesser commodity players, there are great values to be had, and there are still DFS contests to win on these alternate field events. So thanks for all the support. We're closing in on 100 subscribers, and I wouldn't be able to do it without you all. So I always appreciate the interaction and the feedback and the fun that we've had for the past couple years doing calls. So for all of the wagers that you've made this week for the Barbasol Championship, for all of the DFS contests you play this week for the Barbasol Championship, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Scottish Open DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.